Hey everyone, I just wanted to introduce to you this interview with Pat and Pam Hess and then Matt and Marina Dornacker, who went to Albania recently with Step of Faith Ministry to see what Pastor Plator and his network of churches and his network of church planters and missionaries are doing in Albania to further the gospel. Pat and Pam and Matt and Marina were there in early September with a few other people from various churches, and they were there for a little over a week. And just wanted to catch up with them, interview them, and just put out a long form interview about their trip. It took a little while to schedule and be able to connect our schedules. I wasn't able to interview all four of them at once, so I got Pat and Pam Hess, followed by Matt and Brina. But I think this will bless you, and I think this will encourage you to pray for those in Albania, to pray for those around the world who live in places where less than 2% of the population know Jesus, have heard about Jesus, and where we need to send more workers, and maybe even pray for yourself and whether or not God is calling you to be somebody who goes long-term or even on a short-term trip somewhere in the near future to see what God is doing in a different part of the world. Take a look at this interview. So I want to start with you, Pat.
Okay.
In a like, can you summarize what is a reason? I had a neighbor ask me, why are they going to Albania? He's not a believer. So he asked me, why are they going to Albania? Could you summarize for somebody who asks why you guys went?
Well, we were actually, it was brought to our attention a few years, 4 years ago, through a board meeting, that we started supporting an Albanian pastor. And, so that's kind of how we got hooked up. And then we were invited to come over there and check it out. So, that's part of the 1040 window. It's one of the things we're called to do. It's kind of the CMA's mission statement, Acts 1:8, right? To get out into all of Judea and Samaria.
Yeah. Can you explain what the 1040 window is?
It's the untouched regions where they've never heard the gospel or never heard the name Jesus, never seen a Bible, never. And it's kind of weird to think of that, for me, like, really, but it's true. And we witnessed it here on this last trip. I mean, we gave a lady a Bible, and anyway, yeah, so it's right for the gospel. And there's a lot of untouched areas near the area that we go to and the couple of the areas that we support. And the difference between 4 years ago when we were there and now, to see God on the move and people coming to Christ, was just encouraging and really, really cool to see. So we're glad to be a part of it and hope to continue to be a part of it if it's God's will for our lives.
Yeah. What did you guys do there? Like, what was the, so you kind of explained why Albania, but why did you guys go there? What benefit did you bring? Does that make sense?
Well, as a ministry, Step of Faith, we support several of the kids that are part of their leadership there for college, seminary. We also are plugged into several, like they've got an orphanage. So a lot of it's also going just to see and put feet on the ground to know how better we can support and see how the support that we're given is working.
Like bundles of blessings.
Yeah, like bundles of blessings, getting firewood up into some of the remote villages that otherwise wouldn't be able to get it, getting food, education, all of that stuff.
Gotcha.
And by us going and actually seeing it in action, we're able to share that with supporters. So a lot of times I think things get diluted when people support things, and if there's no accountability, you don't really, so this way we can say, no, man, this is what's happening, this is how it's working, this is what your giving is doing. So I think it's easier for people to get behind that.
That's awesome. Pam, could you, oh, by the way, I want to read the technical definition of the 1040 window. It's a rectangular area of North Africa, Middle East, and Asia between 10 degrees north and 40 degrees north latitude, often called the resistant belt, and includes the majority of the world's Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists. So yeah, like Pat said, it is where so many of the countries that are considered unreached, where less than 2 and sometimes even less than 1% of the population know Jesus. And missiologists have kind of concluded that when a people group has less than 2% of the population knowing Jesus, they depend on outside influences to come in, because they cannot evangelize themselves. It's just not enough. There's not enough of a core critical mass to do that. So Albania is one of those countries. Pam, could you talk a little bit more about the statistics around Albania?
Sure. When we went 4 years ago, they said the country was 73% Muslim. When we went now, they said it's 71% Muslim, but there's been a rise in atheism. A lot of that is, again, from people not hearing the gospel. So there's every town and city in Albania has a mosque, which is, you know, a little different to get used to hear this call to prayer. The first night we were there and we went out for coffee at like 9 o'clock at night, it went on, and it went on for like 15 minutes. And you're just hearing like, you know, this chanting and all. So the Muslims, when communism fell, the Muslims came in, as did the Christians, but the Muslims came in with a lot more money and resources, and they set up a lot more things to attract the kids and people. So what Pastor Plator is doing is hitting in those inroads in a lot of the different villages around Korcha, but it's still a predominantly Muslim country.
Yeah, predominantly Muslim. And then would you say atheism is second most? Like is Christianity is still, do you know where that would be?
I think it's around 2%. I know, I don't think it's much higher than that. It's still a very low percentage within the country, as far as we know.
Okay. So can you guys share like a story of like one person encounter that you had while you were over there that really impacted you?
Yeah. Okay. So we asked Pastor Plator if we can go into one of the 98 villages that he and his teams go into around Korcha. It's a very mountainous terrain. Some of these villages are as far as 5 hours away, and his evangelistic team goes 5 days a week, all year long, winter, spring, summer, fall. When the roads are really bad, they're still getting into these villages. Because what we were told is the people in these villages will never leave their villages. So you can see some of them dotted on the mountains, and he would point to them 4 years ago and say, this is where we need to go, because God is calling us to these people. They've never heard the name of Jesus, which for us is just so foreign to hear. But he said that people living in these villages won't even go to the next village. This is where they live, they go to school, they work, they die. And so one of the things we asked him is if we can bring the team to one of these villages. So about our third day there, he had us go about 2 hours up into the mountains to a small town called Maglica, which only had a population of 200 people. And we went up there to do a Bible club and to plays on word, do the Paul play and worship and craft and all. So when we got up there, we went with some of the Albanian team. And they speak English and they speak Albanian, so they were great translators. And I was with a group and came across one of the women, and as they were speaking with her, she said, well, I'm Muslim. And so one of the interpreters, Yana, said to me, tell her that you're American. They love Americans, and they probably have never seen an American in the village. So as I started to tell this woman that, her eyes got really big. And then I just said, God brought us here. we want to invite you to come hear about Jesus. We want to invite the children to come hear about Jesus. So the first thing she said was, oh, well, there's more children down there. You need to go down there. And I just said, no, Jesus brought me right to you because he loves you. And her eyes just started to get big. But then I asked her, I said, have you heard about Jesus? And she just looked at me and she shook her head no. And it was very impactful because I've never met anyone who hasn't heard about Jesus. So then we opened up to the book of John and began to read. And by the time we got to the part in John that it said, and the word became flesh to dwell among us, you can just see her countenance was changing. We told her that this is a God who loves you, who wants a relationship with you. And through the Muslim religion, they don't hear that. So we gave her the Bible. She bookmarked it. She held it on her chest. And to me, that was the most impactful moment. There was many. I mean, the whole week we were there, but that to me was the biggest, because just meeting someone, knowing that God was using our team to truly bring the gospel to untouched people was very humbling and exciting at the same time.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. How about you, Pat? You got a story in mind?
Yeah, there's so many. But one of the things that I think really impacted me was the team itself, the Albanian team. It's mostly made up of young Muslim converts. They have little to nothing as far as their day-to-day, where they live, very harsh conditions, but they serve with such a joy and such a vigor, and I'm not that plugged into our young adults at our church. So we were kind of asking Matt and Brina, do you guys do stuff like this? And, they on a little, I guess they do a little bit, but just to see the passion that these young kids have to serve the Lord, know who they're serving, was very impactful.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And we need more of that here.
Yeah. Now, were most of those young people, did they get converted to Christianity through Plator's ministry?
A lot of them did. A lot of them came through, he calls them the youth group, but the youth group means young adults.
Gotcha.
So like we, Step of Faith helps to support VBSs over the summer and their youth camps, but their youth camps are about 30 or 40 young adults that he's discipling. And they just, the ones who've come to Christ are going and speaking to others and bringing them into the church and things like that. But the majority of them have come through his first church plant, which is in the town of Lebanique.
Okay. Wow. And how many churches are there that he's planted now?
He's in 9 of the 98 villages right now.
9.
So 4 years ago, he was in 3.
And the goal is to saturate every 98 village with a church.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Wow. That's amazing. And how can our church be praying for them?
I would say for.
Actually, before you answer that question, because I know that uses a different part of your brain than what I'm about to ask you now. What have you found yourself praying the most since you've been back?
For me is that here in America, as Christian believers, we would be more intentional about sharing the gospel as they are in Albania. And we know that we have different obstacles. We have a lot more distractions, a lot more things that pull on our day-to-day that they don't have because of their situations. But either way, I mean, we just were so humbled and convicted and impressed by how they just openly share. They're not afraid to share. The Muslim community can be pretty violent. I mean, Pastor Plator and our friend Mike Durante, they were chased out of the one village that now has a thriving church. They physically chased them out like 6 or 7 years ago. And Plator just knew that God wanted them there and forged ahead, and God provided a building, and now there's like 80 women that come out. It's a predominantly women because the men are very hesitant, but
Hmm.
that would be it for me, is just that, here,
In a sense, for a country that's not been long out of communism and mostly Muslim, it almost seems a little easier to share the gospel there
Yeah.
than it is here. Like, it seems like there's more persecution here and more, distractions and, no's. I think at least people will hear you out there, whether they might just kind of put their hand up or, but I don't know. I mean, I guess it's similar here, but yeah.
Do you think it's partly because in the United States, people have been so inoculated to the hearing about Jesus that they kind of feel like, I've heard that already. I have an idea of that. You don't have to tell me. I grew up going to church. I've been there, done that. Do you think that that's part of it?
Yeah, and I mean, like, we've got a lot more than they have. So there's, it's like this. I can do everything I need to do for myself. Like, I don't need this God.
Yeah.
Where when you have nothing, you're more apt to want to try to cling to something that's going to provide for you or give you hope or something like that. I feel like we're so dumbed down here that, there's not that need. Like, you see the same thing in Haiti, it's like,
the less you have, the more you're pulled towards Jesus, like, and especially in the Muslim religion, because there is no speaking of love and the women especially are very, like, the women can't go where the men go. They can't read the Quran. They're told what to do and what not to do. So when a group of people approach them and say, we want to tell you about our God, our Jesus, who loves you, who wants the relationship with you, you can talk directly to, like, if you've never heard that, I mean, wouldn't that bring that excitement to anyone's soul, that there is an actual God like that? Because unlike here, where you hear so much and so many, even denominations of Christianity, so many ways to worship God, they've heard nothing.
Yeah.
So they're very open, and they love Americans. They love Americans. So it makes it.
I think it's just it's a different, obviously, foreign country, but yeah, they're so warm and welcoming, whether they want to hear what you have to say or not, religiously,
Yeah.
I mean, they're just very inviting, welcome you in, want to feed you, want to give you fruit, want to give you, and they don't have a lot to give to begin with, but they're ready to let you in and give you whatever they can.
Wow.
And they're still a very oppressed people, like going into this winter. The government says, because of what's happening in Ukraine, even though that they're not receiving any electrical anything from Ukraine, the government's saying they're going to turn off the electricity from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. every day.
Why?
Because they're kind of following what Europe is doing, who is being affected by Russia shutting down the pipelines and things like that. So they kind of are mimicking that, and they don't want to fall into any type of a crisis.
So it's like energy conservation, but then it becomes, it's a cold environment this time of year, so.
And some of them have converted, like Pastor Platour a few years ago was able to actually take his wood burning stove out of his little apartment and put in electric heat. So now he'll have no heat. They run a residential house for 9 boys, an orphanage. They run a day center for 42 street children. That it's inconceivable, but at night they sleep in abandoned buildings. But at least during the day, they can come to this house and be fed and take a shower and do homework and have clothes, so that's not going to have heat. And so it's pretty tough. They live in very difficult situations.
Wow. Were you at the day center?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we went to both.
What are the age ranges for those kids?
Oh, my goodness. The youngest was like 3.
Yeah, 3.
Very young. It's
10, 11.
Yeah, you can't conceive it. And even talking with Pastor Platour, he said, this is all we can do by law. unless they have a humongous orphanage where they can take in these 42 children. And
then
there's
they got to have, the staffing to be able to do that. And it's all got to be legal and documented.
money and
Yeah.
and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of street children in Albania that have no place to go. And
Because they're orphans?
these are orphans. These are either orphans or they have like a grandmother or someone in the picture that may be with them in this abandoned kind of building at night. But a lot of them they're street kids. They have no family. So Plator has opened up this day center that we've been helping to try to raise support for, and for the children, so they can receive what they need on a day-to-day basis. So it's hard. It's hard to go there because that would never happen here. You're not going to see a 4-year-old walking on the street and sleeping in a building. And we've got child services. We have all of these things here that they don't have really set up unless the churches are setting them up privately to try to intervene.
Wow. Jeez. So any final thoughts on what we can be praying for?
Well, I think for myself is financial support to help in these situations, like with the day center, with the residential house. We have an Albania relief that we try to send over there. The bundles of blessing every 3 months feeds 28 families right now that have nothing, So we're trying, as Patrick said earlier, when we brought the team over, to expand people's perception of what's happening in this country.
Build awareness of what's going on, and to generate more prayer and potential support.
I think on a personal note we call them the A team, for the Albanian team, is that they can endure the rejection from their family, because a lot of them, they don't, their families have disowned them because they left Islam, the Islamic faith. So prayer for them, that they would stay encouraged. And actually those that we're able to put through college, one of the biggest things that goes on in Albania is students will go through school, but let's say a nurse. You become a nurse in Albania, you'll make about 500 a month. If you go to Germany, you'll make 3,000 a month. So a lot of young people, as soon as they get their college education, they're leaving as Christians. So what we're trying to do is to continue to raise support that they can actually work within the church with their different skills and be able to, continue this gospel message and get into these 98 villages where these people are desperate for the gospel.
Do you have any particular young people in mind that you're like, man, I met this person, I'm praying that they can stay, and I'm praying that, and Step of Faith is going to try to support this one person kind of thing?
We have 2 right now. We have
Davey.
Leo.
Leo.
Yeah, Leo and Mario, right?
But then aren't we supporting for the college fund?
Well, we're supporting 2 to go to college right now. So we were able to put that support aside, but there's 2 young men, Mario, and these men are coming in about 3 weeks. They'll be here doing some worship and all for 3 weeks. They'll be in New Jersey, their worship team. Mario is the worship leader, and Plator told us that he is the poorest out of everyone, but he does the most.
And Dennis.
And Dennis, that's right. So I'm sorry, I'm getting wrong. And Dennis is the second one. Dennis is like Plator's right-hand man, and he has nothing. He has this little apartment that we were just able to put in windows for, and a pellet stove, so he has heat. And all we're looking for right now is to try to find like $150 a month to support each one of them. Like that would give them a lift in going in the direction that they would need to go.
I don't know. It's got to be Jesus, but like when you look at them and you talk to them, you see how they dress, you see how they groom themselves. They're well kept. They all look good. They all seem happy. And then to know what they go home to is just like, for me, it'd be kind of tough to maintain that countenance and have that joy and, you know, and hopefully this, you know, them coming here doesn't like, oh, I don't want this anymore. You know, look what they have. And, you know,
Yeah, right,
hopefully something like that doesn't happen, you know.
right. Wow. Yeah.
Because yeah, you know, if you looked at them, you met them on the street, you know, met them here, you would know that they wanted for anything and they love Jesus. But, you know, knowing the conditions they live in and the way they handle themselves is just pretty incredible.
It's like they've truly learned to live a sacrificial life for
Yeah.
Christ. And again, that was what another convicting part of being with them. Like, you know what they have and don't have, you know what their family life is like, you know what they gave up. I
Yeah.
mean, if they were still following with their family, they'd probably have college paid for. Be living in a warm house. They've been, you know, but they would be dead in their spirit. So they gave up all the comforts to follow Jesus. I mean, to me, like, again, it's just so biblical what they are doing and how they're pursuing the things of God, that we can just continue to learn so much from them. And,
Mm.
you know, so yeah.
Wow. You guys praying about going there, moving there one day?
Yeah.
Mhm.
We've kind of given ourselves 5-6 years to see, you know, what God does between now and then. But, you know, we talked about it 4 years ago when we were there, you know, like she's always been open to moving and being out on the mission field full time. And, you know, at the time, you know, her kind of focus was Haiti. And, you know, I love what's going on there in Haiti, but it is saturated with Christianity. And I just don't know if I could do that, if I could do Haiti, but I could get plugged to Albania. So we're praying about it. We're praying about it and seeing where God takes that. And but yeah, we're praying about it.
That's
with
awesome.
each trip, like we're already planning a trip for next September again, to bring a team back. You know, we just want to continue to explore what God would have, and probably make a trip at some point in the winter, you know, to really experience the winter. Not that we want that to be a determining factor, but just so we can understand it, you know, because
Mhm.
we hear the difficulties and things like that. But you know, for myself and being the missions coordinator with Step of Faith, you know, the one thing that's always been in my mind is, Lord, if you're sending us, I would hope that you're going to raise up others here to be able to continue the other parts of Step of Faith and what needs to be accomplished in the day to day, like hands on. And I'm seeing glimmers and of that, and
Mm.
like a few young people, and don't know what God's going to do with them or not. But that would be our prayer, you know, that it's not something we're feeling right now that we're just going to up and leave regardless. But if God is going to show us, that would be one of the signs, in a sense, that we're going in the direction he wants us to go in, by raising up at least one other person to kind of fill the shoes that I have here. So it's exciting. It's definitely an exciting time. I mean, being at the age we're at right now, that we don't have children, you know, we have availabilities to do that, if
Yeah.
without having to take care of those other, you know, pieces.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Lord, I just end by praying for these two, that you would let this idea become either warmer or colder over the next few years. That you would either confirm or redirect. We're all called to be on mission for you. Some of us are called to go into those least reached places, to cross cultural and ethnic barriers, to cross boundaries, nation states, in order to reach more people for you, Lord. So I pray that you would confirm whether that is for Pat and Pam over the next 5 to 6 years. And Lord, I pray that you would provide the financial support for those young people who are in Albania that are called to reach others there, but may not be able to afford staying there without outside support.
Mhm.
And God, just provide them with warmth this winter, with electricity being cut off. Provide them with warmth, heat. I pray in your name. Amen. So tell me, let's start off by just saying, why did you guys decide to go on this trip? Why Albania?
Okay, I'll share. So Matt and I had shared when we got engaged that, just the date of our wedding was Labor Day weekend. And then I'm a teacher. So starting up at school 2 days later, there's no way we're going on a honeymoon. It's not realistic. And, just like affording something like that, like a honeymoon and things, it's just not in our books. And then, as our engagement went on, Matt and I shared, if we ever were to go on a honeymoon, we would love to go somewhere and maybe serve in some way. We didn't know what that looked like. I had never gone internationally before. Matt has, so I think his heart was kind of already in that with like Haiti and things like that. Pam brought up Albania, and I was like, there's no way. I can't take off 2 weeks. My principal will fire me. There's no way. She's like, listen, all you can do is ask him, pray about it, and then ask him, and just let me know what he says. If he says no, then he says no. I then, for a couple months, we were praying about it that we could just go, because if it was God's will for us to go serve internationally, we would just love for that to just be evident to us.
Yeah.
Long story short, my principal at the time, I have a new one. It was a Christian.
Oh.
And I was able to have a one-on-one conversation with him one day. And we had already talked a lot about just different biblical things before, which was awesome. And I was like, hey, is there any way I can go to Albania for my honeymoon? He's like, and before I could even finish, he's like, yes, just like write down the dates and go. And I was like, wow, well, that's it. We're going. So Pam, of course, brought that to our attention. And that was something that Matt and I, especially just knowing that there were kids there that we could work with that were, orphans. And that's something that our heart, is really like hurts for.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
So, yeah.
So wanting to serve internationally in general, it wasn't really about Albania at first, but hearing about some of the orphans and some of the stuff that goes on kind of tugged at your heart.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And keep going.
Is that because of your passion for kids?
I mean, Matt, do you want to speak on that a little bit?
We kind of, as Brina just shared, felt as if God has blessed us in so many ways, and just knowing where true fulfillment comes in, and kind of in serving Him, and so it was almost, in a way, I kind of saw it as like, not to sound too like I don't know, whatever, like overly righteous, but I saw it as a way of treating ourselves. Because
there's no greater fulfillment than serving God, and that looks different for everyone and every couple.
Right. And just even being able to have the opportunity, just the way things lined up with Pam reaching out and sharing to us about this missions trip.
And it was a day after our wedding, and they planned that before we ever picked our date or anything.
Right. And we already had in mind going on a missions trip. So it was kind of like, wow, that kind of fell into place. That was all. It kind of seemed like God's hand was on it.
You already were thinking about it would be great to go on a mission trip, and then that came up?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So
right. And then, yeah, and it's something that we were both interested in doing potentially in the future, missions work. So I was like, let's get our feet wet. This kind of just all seems like it's meant to be.
Yes. God would made it very obvious, because Matt's schedule is easy. He can get off pretty much whenever he wants, not me. So the fact that my principal, before I can even explain myself, was like, yes, go, which is absolutely unheard of for a school district, a public school district, to let someone go for 2 weeks internationally to serve and for their honeymoon. I just took that as our sign, like, wow, God heard our prayers, because we were praying about it for months. Like, hey, is this the right thing for us? Or, no, it's not. And, he really just came through with that answer. And then we were able to go.
Got it. Okay. And then Okay, so you went, you got there. What'd you see God do? What's like one thing what's one highlight that you saw God do?
So for me, wow, there's so much, but something that immediately came to my mind is the kids there. I mentioned that earlier, but there are just a lot of homeless people, orphans, and something about seeing kids without parents, homes, food, their mouths, they're so like malnutritioned that like their hair is orange, their teeth are rotted. Like it's just like
Mm,
heartbreaking.
yeah.
And you think about the book of James, how we're supposed to serve and love orphans and widows, and that was just practically seen in the Church of Albania, the way they love and care for these children, is just so eye-opening, and it's biblical. It was straight up like scripture coming to life when we got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt with that. What about you, Matt? Because there's so much. I could say so much.
Sure.
It's crazy. The kids come to mind. One other thing, because Matt might not mention it, but this was really powerful, and I still think about this. There was one of our last trips. We were going around and just knocking on people's doors, and I think through the step of faith, they have bundles of blessings, the food that go
Right.
to certain houses. There was one family we went into, and it was a mother and her son was severely disabled, and he had this disease where his skin was really irritated. What was it? It was bad, like just a bad disease that he had. He couldn't talk, so he was very severely disabled. The mom had shared, asked if we could pray for him. And just laying hands on him and them asking us to pray for him, which again, in the Muslim culture, like, you know, that's not happening.
Right.
So they welcomed Americans into their home. And Matt was able to pray for them, but we all laid hands on this boy. And it was just like, I just felt the Holy Spirit in that moment. Like I was literally crying. Like, why am I crying right now? But we were just praying for this boy. And he was so sweet. And he just wanted, and we were able to hug him and just show love to this family that was hidden in this little town, not a nice area, didn't have anything. And just that prayer alone, the food's awesome, of course, too, to nourish their bodies, but being able to pray for him and just them asking us to pray for them was awesome too.
Yeah. Wow.
What about you?
What about you, Matt? Yeah. Anything stand out to you?
Yeah, so it's crazy because now a lot of things are coming to my mind now that Brina was kind of just sharing a little bit of what she had shared. Like just even the the parable of the mustard seed. How just from Plateau giving us, background into their
Ministry?
yeah, kind of into their ministry and how they kind of got started. Very small, the church over there.
Yeah.
And then seeing how the churches, as he was taking us around, the churches that they had planted,
Mhm.
and the communities within the churches, and to see his group going out and supporting each of the churches, continually revisiting each area. And and real quick side note, I feel like his ministry and with God is working just like mightily through Plateau. And it's amazing what God does when people just kind of step out in faith and boldness, and with no sort of elaborate way of sort of bringing people to Christ, just being like stepping up when they're called and just telling people about Jesus very plainly. But just that being a side note, like back to the parable of the mustard seed, and that kind of plays into this, because God's the one who makes the God's kingdom grow. God grows God's kingdom.
Yeah.
regardless, inevitably. And it was just like obvious. I feel like it's inevitable what's gonna happen. It's like I felt like it's inevitable what has happened and what is going to happen. It's inevitable. You could see it because the growth that was happening and witnessing that growth from what he had told us and what we were seeing in front of our eyes, visiting some of the churches in some of the areas, just to see God's hand in that and his blessing on that, but and it's real, you know, it's just this crazy sense of like, just, wow, this is what he's talking about when he talks about the parable of the mustard seed. And then going beyond that, like when we would, and going beyond the church. So like going outside, going out from underneath the mustard seed plant, right? Like going out into the rest of the country, into other places in the country where they don't know about Jesus. You could see how, and it's there's other scripture that kind of comes to mind is how the workers are few, but how the harvest is so plentiful, and how, like Brina was kind of talking about, they seem to be very receptive, especially the women, which is like in that culture, the men seem to be from, you know, sort of starting from the government down over time through being Muslim dominated through the Ottoman Empire, and then afterwards, you know, they kind of wanted to like implement this like nationalism, this like almost like the religion was like nationalism and like atheism. So it's like a lot of like Muslim and atheism and atheists, and the men kind of have like this they put on sort of like this masculine vibe, and they kind of act standoffish, but in some circumstances we're acting receptive, which is interesting. But the women definitely more so being receptive of the gospel, which again testifies to God's truth, and because we know that the women have humble hearts because they've been oppressed in their culture. And so it's just amazing to see that fold out. Another like one of God's truths just unfold. Like, okay, so like it's obvious, like the humble heart, like another parable that came to my mind was like the parable of the sower and the soils, and it's just evident that the women seem to have like this good soil over there because they have that humble heart and that good soil. And yeah, it's kind of just amazing to see that, and to see how God goes before us and kind of is already, you know, working in the hearts of people before we even get to them, you know, and before we're even able to share. And it was that, I feel like that you could just see that in their culture, like, right? They were just like, I don't know how to explain it. There was less distractions. We had to talk about like with Pam with this, like there's sort of different, the enemy works in different ways, and like I feel like he works different here in America, but there's less distractions there. So like it's almost like a lot of their culture is aware that there's like this higher being.
Do you guys have a desire? Did it make you guys, here's my last question. Did it make you guys want to go back to Albania? Did it make you guys want to consider praying about moving and like becoming international missionaries, you know, picking up and moving somewhere? Did it make you, you know, get stirred to start thinking about other countries? Did anything like that pop up?
Well, before I even met Matt, I had lived internationally in Korea.
Really?
Yeah, I taught English in South Korea, and I loved that. And I remember when we met, that was something, I mean, Matt has an interest in a little bit of different work than maybe more so me as a woman, but internationally, we both, before we even met, were like, we would love to, if God made that evident for us, that path open and straight to us, that we would love to be, you know, international servers. I don't know necessarily Albania.
What's the country that comes to mind, like on your gut first, Brina?
Matt, I mean, me, I don't know. I've never been anywhere, but Matt would say Morocco.
Huh, okay. But you don't know? You don't know, Brina, other than Korea?
Me, I would say Haiti, since you know,
Gotcha.
we've been, or, you know, any red dot, that was kind of like what Matt and I had talked about when we, you know, and Morocco is a red dot, and that's something we've looked into before. It's a little bit more dangerous. So even just in a selfish way, maybe it is selfish, like I can just really see us even raising a family, like in just like a very humbled environment where I could just see.
Again, we're just kind of being open, and we know that red dot areas we
Are in
have-
need.
right,
Now, when
exactly.
you call them red dot areas, where do you get that phrase from?
Well, from kind of like even what you kind of showed us in some of like the Bible project, or the not the Bible project, the Joshua project.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure if you were referencing that or not. Okay,
Yeah,
Yes.
we look right.
Yeah, we
I'm sorry.
looked through that.
Yeah, we were like kind of looking at some of the areas on that website.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, we're less than 2% of the population know Jesus.
Mhm.
Right.
This is-
Well, it was when you shared the video last year with the missionaries going to Germany, I think it was, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
couple. I remember in that moment, I was like, I don't want to say anything to Matt, but I was like, I could really see us doing that. And then Matt mentioned it first, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. Because I could just, I was thinking the same thing.
Well, because it's another thing too, real quick, but another thing that's coming to my mind is you can see how the harvest is plentiful. Like we saw that when we were going out to the village, the harvest is the harvest is ripe, but you can see how, especially places where the gospel's relatively fresh, like Albania. Well, not that it's fresh, because they actually were
Communist.
right. Well, no, they were Christian actually, like before any of that.
Yeah.
You could just, it was like you could see how there could be a need for workers, for people, for like discipleship,
Yes.
right, because obviously when you start, you only have so many people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They have a great team in Albania, though. It
Right.
is, it's kind of crazy. This is their life out there. They don't work. I mean, the work out there is very little, like financial work.
Yeah.
You're either a farmer or a coffee shop owner, I feel like, or you're nothing. And they serve, you know, every day in different ways. And that was something that we were like, whoa, we work every day. And
Yeah.
of course, God uses us through our
Exactly.
jobs. So their serving just looks a little different, where it's hands-on every day. They're going into these villages every single day.
It's more resemblant of like the early church in Acts.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we said when we were all at a table, 33 of us, after we just had went out, and we got back and we were just talking about everything. They call it like debriefing and stuff. And it gets like emotional, because you think, wow, like you think about the early church, like Matt just said, you know, they just went out today, Jesus did, like, and all this stuff, and then they come back and they're all talking about it, like, look what happened, who did you talk to, like, just.
And that would be a typical day for them?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And Pastor Chris, like, so, and I've heard you kind of like talk on this, and you can see how there's when we're kind of living within like kind of like the way God called us to, and going out and spreading the gospel, and when we're all doing that as a church, you've talked about this, like how it's that sense of like being on the football field, and how you're not on the sidelines, and how like when there's this sort of camaraderie that's built, and like it's almost, you can use that analogy, or like going to battle, like because with your brothers, you know, and your sisters, you're going to battle where you're coming across these crazy life experiences, you're putting your lives on the line, you're doing things that you're not comfortable with, and you're together, so it builds this camaraderie and this closeness, and like that's the church. You know, they regather after that, and they talk about it, and they talk about their experiences, what they could do better, you know, and it's just that sense of unity and camaraderie within the church was evident when, you know, when you're on the football field.
Yeah.